Now let's unpack that a little bit. The wages of sin is what? Right. And we are this morning, what are we? We're alive. You know, I hear people say they want to collect their paycheck, you know. I want to receive my wages. Trust me, I never want to receive my wages. I will be so grateful if I never receive my wages, and God has made provision that I don't have to. Amen? Is that a blessing? Yeah, so when we get talking about remuneration and wages and people get into discussions and conflict, I just slip that into their thinking. Okay? Every breath we take, every heartbeat we have is a gift from God. We receive it because he loves us. You know, God didn't just wind this planet up and wind up the universe and set it out there and it's all just kind of working on a tension, you know, from that wind. God sustains us moment by moment by his love, by his goodness, and he's cognizant of it. He's aware that he's sustaining us. So with that backdrop, you know, I remember years ago I read there was a book called The Challenge of Missions. And the guy gave a very good paradigm shift. You know, as Seventh-day Adventists, when I became a Christian, my brother couldn't believe it. He had become a Christian. And when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, he was really worried. He was like, you know, what's that? And he was living in a Lutheran church. And he ran to the pastor and he said, hey, pastor, my brother's getting in with these Seventh-day somethings, you know, and I've never heard of them, and are they a cult? And he was really worried. And the Lutheran pastor looked at him and he says, oh, Kevin, you don't worry about it. You know, their big thing is the Sabbath. He says, but those Adventists, they're good people. They pay tithe. Those Adventists, they pay tithe. Is that true? You know, I learned about tithing as I became a Seventh-day Adventist, and I got the treasurer confused a little bit because on the envelope every week, I would put 10 plus 10, and then I would tell him where I wanted it to go. And after a few months, he says, listen, man, the first 10, you can't tell me where you want it to go. You know, that's there. You can tell me where you want the other 10 to go, but you can't tell me where that first 10 goes. That's already designated. But in this book, the man challenges. He says, you know, the question really is not, how much of my money am I going to give God? The question really is, how much of God's money am I going to keep for myself? You get it? It's all his. Right? Every heartbeat, everything we do, we live and move and have our being in Jesus Christ. So without him, we can do what? So who's doing all this? He's doing it. And so as we share with you the privilege we've had to be involved in this initiative called Adventist Help, it's clearly something God has done, and we've been blessed to be able to participate with him in this opportunity, in this privilege. And with that, I'd like to go to the first slide, if we may. And I'll tell you a little bit how this organization on the back of my shirt it's not even an organization yet. We're working on that. We're 2 years into it, and we're a little slow on some things. Do you know what procrastination is? Anybody familiar with that experience? You know, we do what we know how to do, right? Because we know how to do it, and it's easy to. When there's other things that also need to be done, but we're not familiar with navigating that path, then we kind of leave those things for later. And due to the nature of what we're involved in, we left getting ourselves an organized corporation. So we're an initiative. We were in Europe for an ASI Europe convention. For 4 years, I've served as the vice president for ASI Europe. And even though we live in Africa, that's a different story. But here we are in Hungary, in Budapest, for a convention. And while we're there, this is the local train station. There's 3,500 people living in the Budapest train station. Now, that's not a normal arrangement. Okay? That is not what the train station was built for. And this was the beginning of the refugee crisis that was hitting Europe. Syria, as you know, had been in civil war for several years by then, and things got worse and worse and worse, and hundreds of thousands of Syrians were crossing over. People in Afghanistan were crossing over. And so Here they are in this train station, and there was an appeal made by a visitor from America to our convention. He said, you need to do something to help these people. There's an opportunity to serve. There's an opportunity to bless people in a way that we haven't been afforded to before, and he made an appeal to us to do something about it, and he made a commitment to help us do something about it. As a result of an exploratory trip by a young lady named Christiana and her friend Wayne, they went out to see what could we do that would be beneficial to help the refugees. And they got to the island of Lesbos in Greece, and as they were there and witnessed these boats coming in, raft after raft, boat after boat, filled with these people, they came back to us and said, we should go down there and we should put an emergency, urgent medical care facility right on the shore. So you see that bus there. Conference from Romania. There were 5 of us kind of working on this. One of us is a Romanian. He contacted the conference. He knew they had this bus. Romania drove it down, got it there for us, and then we turned it into a clinic. The boats come in day, they come in at night. Many of the people that begin the journey don't finish the journey alive. About 2.5 months after we got into this, there was a photo that went viral throughout the media in the world of a lifeless form of a little boy laying on a beach, washed up on a beach, I should say. And a man went and picked him up. And that photo helped the world to get a conscience about what was happening with these people. And while we cannot solve the problem of why what's happening is happening, we certainly can minister to these folks. On the right of that picture, you see a young man, Klaus Nybo. He's one of the group of 5 of us. Klaus has a ministry in Sweden. It's lifestyle TV, and it's similar to what 3ABN does. It's 24/7 to bring helpful, profitable, encouraging programming. And this is what you're standing on the shore looking for. You're looking to spot these boats and the folks that are in them, so when they come in, you can give them assistance. Many times the waves are high, the water is cold, especially the children arrive with hypothermia, and then we set up chains of people to get the people from the boats to the shore. These folks are just like you and I. Many of these people had their own private business. They were engaged in life every day. They had homes. They had careers. And everything that they had was taken from them in the course of the war. Their homes were destroyed. Their family members many of them were dead. And here you can get a sense of some of the tragedy of what happens to these people. And they have no idea when they left Syria what lie ahead of them. But they did know that they were in a living hell where they were. And they knew if they stayed where they were, the possibilities of them dying were very great. And so they fled the best they could. Here's Dr. Michael John Van Orsten. I've known Michael since he was a toddler. My wife and I spent most of our time living in Africa. He's from South Africa. He heard about Adventist Help and what we wanted to do. He took 2.5 months off of his work, and he came up, and he became really the lifeblood and the encouragement of making this thing successful. Unlike my generation, I do not have a Facebook account. My wife does, and it works really well for her. I haven't been able to figure that part out, okay? Michael does Facebook, and he's got lots of friends on Facebook, and he shared the need of what was happening with these refugees. People from around the world that he had worked with started to volunteer to come and to help. And so all our workers are volunteer. They fly themselves there. They get no pay from us while they're there. We try to provide them a bed that's dry, that's warm, and meals. And that's Adventist Help commitment, the best we can make if the volunteers will come and help us. And here you can see some of the families arrived at night. We try to give them something warm. We often have to get them out of their clothes that are soaking wet to the bone and get them dried off and get them warm clothes. And one of the greatest challenges when people have hypothermia is to get them warm enough to get out of critical condition. And unfortunately, during the early days, because it was winter and because it was cold, and we did not have a warming station, even though we would get the small children and the infants dried off into warm clothing and bundled up, we'd send them up the road 2-3 kilometers to a camp, a holding camp, before they could go on to another camp. And in the night, many of these children would die. And that was a big perplexity and heartbreaker for the teams that were there working with those children, to know that this didn't have to happen, but we just didn't have the resources and we didn't have the facility to save more lives than what we were able to. And I have this as a video. Klaus from Lifestyle TV took this, and he took a video, and this boat, right after this photo was taken, started to capsize completely. And these people that you see just fell or jumped, lunged into the water, and then the group trying to help them get to the shore. Within the first week that we had the bus there, right on the rocks in front of us, within 15 minutes out of getting out of the boat, women gave birth on rocks like these. The trip over, the anxiety, they went into early labor, or maybe they didn't go into early labor, maybe they went at the right time, I don't know, but it was a blessing we could be there to help care for them once the children were born. Here you see just the debris and people. I love this picture. You know, Jesus has told us, you know, suffer the children to come unto us, right? Except you become his children. And that we don't want to offend. Jesus, it's better for you to be cast into the sea with a millstone around your neck than to offend one of these little ones. And so it's a joy, it's a privilege to minister, to give them encouragement, to give them a moment of happiness. And Michael's really good at that. Yeah. After the beach experience, or the shorefront experience, you're well aware that Europe had to close its doors to the refugees. For a while, those doors were open, and all these refugees were coming through Greece and going right out up into Austria, into Germany, into France, into Sweden, into Denmark. And those doors all closed, and the EU made Greece close its doors, close its borders, and all the refugees had to remain in Greece. And they made an arrangement with Turkey so no more boats would be allowed to leave Turkey, but they're trying to contain the crisis that way. And so as that happened, we were approached by the Air Force. This guy in uniform is actually from the Air Force, and standing with him in an Adventist Help Church is Marcus Alt, and he was our coordinator in Greece at the time, and we agreed to take on this new assignment of being stationed at a refugee camp about 45 minutes outside of Athens, because now people were going to be here for the long term. And some of you may be teachers here, you may work for another company, you may have your own business, you may be a doctor, whatever your walk of life is. That's what these people's walks of life were, okay? They've left a very productive life, and now they're confined to this tent. Now, they're not prisoners, but they can't go anywhere. Okay? They have to be in and with the camp. And just think of that paradigm shift. If you were leading a very productive, active life in your community, as you are here in the Denver area, and then you end up in a tent that size, and this is where you live, and this is where you stay, and this is where you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we've tried to set up a variety of services to minister. While this was going on, a pastor named Ted Wilson visited Iraq. And when he got to Iraq, I shouldn't say when he got there, when he came back from several days there, he came to us and he appealed to Adventist Help. He says, if you think the refugee crisis in Greece is overwhelming, you need to come to see what's going on in Iraq. We really need Adventist Help to consider coming to help the work in Iraq. We have an opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity, to minister in a way we've never had the opportunity before. And so we discussed it amongst us, the 5 of us, and we agreed that it would be great to go help. But for one reason or another, safety being one of them, no one was really ready to go and do an exploratory trip to Iraq. Just didn't seem, yeah, the need was real, and that was for sure, but it seemed like a great risk. But finally we got across that barrier, and we went to Kurdistan, to Erbil, and you can see Mosul. You're familiar with that bottom city on that sign. We're 60 kilometers from Mosul, where ISIS has had its last stronghold for the last several years. And I believe most people in this room are familiar with ISIS. You understand what that organization is about. And so as we visited with people there, the needs were horrendous and mind-boggling. Okay, because not only did you have hundreds of thousands of Syrians flooding over from Syria into Iraq, you have hundreds of thousands of IDQs, internally displaced people from Iraq that are fleeing ISIS, that can't go back to their homes and need care. And so, through Providence, I did an exploratory trip, came back with a report, and praise the Lord, soon after, Dr. Michael John Van Orsten, who, Michael's got a really unique opportunity. He takes contracts to set up emergency rooms around the world. And so he'll do a contract for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is, earn enough money so he can cover his bills, and then he comes back to Adventist Help. And then he helps try to take us to the next step we should be involved in. And so even though I had made a trip and gave a lot of information, it really wasn't until Michael came on board and was able to spend a month there. And through that experience, we were able to partner with ADRA. Some of you have heard of ADRA. ADRA was there, they had an office, and they had no activity. Adventist Help came, we had an activity to offer, but we were an initiative. So as Michael John went around and showed pictures and told them what we'd done with refugees in Greece, they said, please come. Okay, we'll come. Well, give us your documents. What do you mean documents? Well, give us your legal papers so that we can treat you as an organization, an NGO, and we can process it. And we said, well, we don't have that. We just help people. We're really not, we are organized, but we're not legal. But this is just what we come and do. So it was great because ADRA was able to provide the legal foundation for us to be there. They had a legal entity. We had an activity. We had a service that we could offer. So ADRA and Adventist Help partnered together, and we built a 45-bed hospital for a camp of 100,000 people. Okay? And these are some of the people in the camp. If you can imagine, Michael has gone in to Mosul. Okay, there's parts of the city that have been liberated by Iraqi and U.S. forces. ISIS is holding other parts of the city. And as he went in to do a clinic and to help the people that were in urgent need, he saw how emaciated the people were. They're starving to death. Okay, for 3 years, they've been living under the insanity, the stress, the anxiety that living in an insane condition creates for you. Now, if you can imagine, ISIS had one penalty for any infraction. You know what that penalty was? Death. Okay? If you didn't pray fervently enough, they just pulled you out, and you know what they did? They killed you. You didn't want your wife to go out of the house because if she did and somebody thought she looked the wrong direction at the wrong time or that she looked wantingly at someone, you know what they did? They took your wife from your side and they executed her. Now you imagine living that way for 3 years, day in and day out, being governed and being oppressed by these people, and then no food comes in. And then the water gets shut off. Now try to imagine us being in that position. Now, I want to stop here and tell you a story. I had a slide of a picture of a doctor from Switzerland. His name's Patrick. And Patrick is a wonderful guy. I mean, he was a great volunteer, and he brought people with him from Switzerland to help with the refugees. And as we visited, he said, people ask him, man, why do you do this? He said, well, I'm an Adventist, and I that's why I do this. And they said, well, what's an Adventist? He says, well, really, there's different types of Adventists. And they said, really? Yeah, there's different types of Adventists. And they said, well, what type are you? He said, well, I'm a Matthew 25 Adventist. And they said, well, what's a Matthew 25 Adventist? He says, well, Matthew 24 talks about the end times and what the world's going to be like right before Jesus comes. But Matthew 25 talks about the experience God's people are going to have when Matthew 24 is going on. And we'll just go to the end of it. At the end of the day, Jesus calls all nations before him, and we're all there. Every generation. And he separates us. He puts one on the left, one group on the right. And he says to the group on the right, what does he tell them? Come. Enter the joy of your Lord. Enter the kingdom. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick. You're familiar with these verses, correct? And they look at the Lord, and they say, Lord, when did we see you? When did we do this to you? And what does he say? In that you've done it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. And to the ones on the left, he has to tell them to depart. I was hungry and you didn't feed me. Now, Jesus in this parable, in this illustration Jesus is using, he's not asking anybody about what they believed, about church doctrine or about biblical doctrine. The reality is, some of the people have an experience. They understand that in Christ they live and move and have their being. They're so grateful to God for the life he gives them every moment of every day. They see the life of Jesus, and by his grace, he pours that life into his children, and that's why they feed the hungry, and that's why they clothe the naked. Okay? They don't do it to become part of that group. They do it because they are part of that group. You understand the difference? There's no works involved here. It's an experience with God that they have. And that's the type of Adventist Patrick is. And I'll tell you, he challenged me as he shared that story. I want to be a Matthew 25 Adventist. Okay? And God, through Adventist help, is touching the lives of people all over the world, because our volunteers come from all over the world. They come from all walks of life. And there was a discussion we had as we got into this, because you know what? We couldn't find enough Adventists to join us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to staff these needs. And so some people who were not Seventh-day Adventists started calling and saying, can we come help? And Christiana called me. She says, Kim, what should I do? I said, well, Christiana, there's only one spirit that puts compassion into the hearts of people. If God's Spirit has put compassion into the hearts of people that they're going to fly halfway around the world and they're going to minister to these refugees, embrace them. Embrace them. And we have had the opportunity to embrace people from every walk of life, from all over the world. And I'll tell you, the interaction has been unbelievable. Lives are being changed, transformed. Seeds are being sown in a way that is really miraculous. I need to continue because we need to finish up here. But this is it's to move from a 40-foot clinic in a container, which is what we had in Greece. Okay? We moved from the bus to a 40-foot clinic in a container, and now we're into a 45-bed hospital. Now, those of you who are involved in medical work, you understand the insanity of that jump. Okay? To have people working in a 40-foot container, serving a local community, and to have a 45-bed hospital that's outfitted with the equipment, we got state-of-the-art medical equipment that's been donated to us, is a horrendous job. To keep that many medical people on board to take care of the people we're serving is simply a work of faith. Okay, we had no idea when we agreed to respond what we were entering into. Okay, and we agreed to do a 45-bed hospital. We did it on faith that Michael was leading us in the right direction. Okay, I don't know what it means to run a 45-bed hospital. I'm clueless. That's okay. Here's our pharmacy. And so the wards were brand new. The equipment was brand new. It was a wonderful gift and donation. And here are some refugees that have become part of our staff. Okay? These folks are Muslim. They've come out of Mosul. they have skills, and when they saw what we were doing, they wanted to help. They said, can we be part of this? And of course, we said, certainly you can be part of it. They're resident in the camp. And so as they were working with us, we know you don't pay anybody because we don't do that. Not because we don't think it's right and good and just. It is. It's just we don't have the resources to figure that out. Okay. But they said, we'll come. But, when we come every day, you know what they wanted? They didn't want money. Some of you know because I told you. They want their shirt that I'm wearing. They want an Adventist Help shirt because we want to be identified. They wanted to, this was something good. This was something positive. We're doing, and we're representing Adventist Help. And we're part of the Adventist Help family. And so we just said, praise God. And they're on board with us. And here's the first baby that was born in the camp, in our facility. Babies bring great joy. Even in the midst of misery, in the midst of danger, in the midst of tragedy, to have a baby born successfully and alive and crying and well is a wonderful blessing. Okay, and that was my last slide. Can I go back? Yes, I can. Goodbye. Have a blessed week. That's is that providential? I think we've reached our time limit. I thank you for the opportunity to share. I covet your prayers. Okay, just 3 weeks ago, our young guy, Hildy, who's over there, is a young couple in their 20s that are our coordinators. He wrote us, the few of us that are trying to carry this initiative along, and he says, listen, I know this is a faith venture, and I came on board as a faith venture, and he knows all that. He says, but listen, we got bills to pay and we got no money. You got to send me some money. I got to pay rent so the volunteers have a house to sleep in. I got to buy fuel so we can get them from point A to point B. I've got to have food to feed the volunteers, and the cupboards are about empty. And we had no money in our bank account. Okay? And that's when it's a wonderful thing to be reminded, whose work is this? This is God's work. We didn't do this because we thought it was a good idea. Many people told us it was a disastrous idea, that we had no business doing it. Well, maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. We're doing it in faith, believing that this is what God wants us to do. And so, as that came in, I was able to share it with some friends, and their hearts responded. And they've made a contribution so that for the next 2 months, we can keep the part that we're doing going on a financial basis. And so it's exciting where it's going to go from here. I can't tell you. Adventist Help is being appealed to enter into other humanitarian refugee crises in the world. And let me tell you, there's many of them. There's many people that are living under hardship and duress and violence and tragedy. And we are blessed, are we not? We are blessed. And I don't think I'm not going to pray that what has happened in Syria happens in Denver. I don't think that's the education we need, but we do need to remember we are part of a global community. And when Jesus says, you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. Okay, now that's always been a nice saying, but let me try to unpack it for you like God did it for me. If you want to bring heartache to my wife and I, if you really wanted to hurt us, don't touch us. Take our sons. Take our grandchildren. Some of you are parents. Some of you are grandparents. God help the person that violates my granddaughter. You understand what I'm saying? You want to hurt me? Put your hand on them. If you want to bless me, do what? Bless my children. Bless my grandchildren. These are God's children. When we touch these people, we're touching the heart of God. Make no mistake. Jesus gave his life for them. Jesus has a love and intimacy for that person, just like we do for our own children and our own grandchildren. So when Jesus says, you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it to me, he's telling us the truth, folks. He's telling us the truth because it breaks his heart to see his children suffer. And when we minister to them, make no mistake, we are ministering to the heart of Jesus. And we can bless him and we can encourage him. Thank you for allowing us to share.
Amen. Thank you, Kim.